Hello, everyone, and welcome to What's the News. This past week, a lot of people were on edge. A lot of people placed bets. A lot of people's feelings were hurt. But most of all, a lot of people lost their lives. Most of us here in the West sit pretty in our homes with the perfect temperature, enough TV options to last 5 lifetimes, food whenever we want, however we want, staring into screens, playing God, judging this person and that person, complaining because some celebrity or influencer is too skinny or too fat, or they said something that hurt your feelings, or they wore something that you don't like. And the list of trivial things that we allow to take up our energetic space in our lives goes on and on. We get upset because our president is tyrannical and because he says things that we don't like. And don't get me wrong, a lot of things he says are not cleared for release and they lack quality control. But we have absolutely no idea what it truly means to be under the control of a dictator. And the sooner we come back to earth, the sooner we can focus on how we can support people who are actually dealing with that situation. In Iran in 2025 alone, over 2,000 people were executed by hanging. The last time hanging was used for a death penalty in the United States was around 30 years ago. And why are they being hanged? Drug related, allegedly, because you might be a minority, because they believe that you're a spy, because you're a woman who didn't want to be told what to wear. And most of all, because the more aggressive and violent they are, the more people will fear them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that we're anywhere near that. And what was going on last week in Iran? So we know that the protests were already going on. The regime sent in their goons, the IRGC. The goons began spraying crowds with bullets, and we initially heard that around 2,000 people had been mercilessly slaughtered. Trump started trumping, so what did the regime decide? We'll cut off the internet in the entire country. Now, if Trump cut off the internet in the United States, which I don't even know if it's a possibility to do that, which already tells you something. If Trump did that, people would have strokes, heart attacks, mental breakdowns, who knows what. And as of today, when we're shooting, the internet in Iran has been cut off for over something like 175 hours. And why would a regime do that if not to hide something? It's been largely circulated that currently at least 13,000 people have been slaughtered, many even murdered in hospitals as they seek treatment for injuries from protesting. And the families of the people who have been murdered are being charged thousands of dollars just to receive the remains of their loved ones. So now let's get into the US and Israel of it all. When the murdering began, Trump huffed and puffed and said he was going to attack Iran. I believe we spoke about this last week a bit. Khamenei made fluffy claims and they tried to villainize protesters. And then they claimed they were no longer killing protesters, but they also started moving millions of dollars out of the country. So Trump reeled himself back a little bit. And then allegedly, Bibi said that he asked Trump not to attack because they weren't ready yet. However, more and more military ships are continuing to move towards the Middle East. So let's take a pause and break some things down about Khamenei versus Bibi and Trump. Khamenei is calculated. Why? Because he operates from a system that understands control and dominance. Calculation understands I control the situation and affect your reaction, or you control the situation and you affect my reaction. This is a dominance play. Someone needs to be in control, and the other one needs to be controlled. Calculation is playing a game, making a decision because you want your opponent to make a certain decision. Bibi and Trump are intentional. They have a goal, they have intelligence. However, they also want to understand the mechanics of the system behind the intelligence. So they might pull a string here or there to see how it moves. They might push one or two buttons to see what's triggered, but intention plays above the game. Calculation plays within it. Now, I don't personally believe that Trump just happened to decide not to attack Iran this past week. I don't think that he ever intended on attacking Iran last week. He planned on pushing buttons to see what Iran's move would be. And so he would see what they would do and how they could be more prepared than they already were. And Bibi also didn't just happen to give him a call and say, hey, we're actually not ready for this fight. So can we pump the brakes a bit, my dude? But they sure do want Khamenei to react emotionally to think that they're not ready. They want Khamenei to believe they're scrambling and hesitant and unprepared. Bibi and Trump have likely been planning this since June, if not far before then. People like to react to the dots and not draw the lines in between. So, what are some of the domino effects from this whole Iran situation? It was reported that Trump imposed tariffs at the rate of 25% for any country doing business with Iran. However, no official documentation has been filed. The EU Parliament, however, decided to ban all diplomats and representatives from Iran. The president of the parliament stated, as the brave people of Iran continue to stand up for their rights and liberty, today I have taken the decision to ban all diplomatic staff and any other representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran from all European Parliament premises. This House will not aid in legitimizing this regime that has sustained itself through torture, repression, and murder. To those brave girls, students, men, and women on the streets, this is your time, and know that any regime that blocks communication is a regime that is terrified of its own people. Many voices across the UK have stepped up to condemn what's happening in Iran and are pushing for several new sanctions against Iran. And I suppose Russia couldn't help but include itself. So Putin decided again to mediate between Iran and Israel. We remember that they also mediated before the 12-day war. Maybe this version of Putin will be able to do what that version couldn't. What's happening in Iran is absolutely heartbreaking. And God willing, soon the people of Iran will be safe and relieved from any looming threats and that they'll understand what freedom feels like again. So what's going on in the US? In Los Angeles, there was an anti-Islamic Republic protest coming out in solidarity with the protesters of Iran, and a U-Haul truck with a sign against the regime and also against the Shahs rammed through people who were protesting. The group represented is a Marxist group that's been around for the last around 60 years or so. It wasn't someone related to the Islamic regime. However, this specific group, MEK, is known to initiate terrorizing activities. Other news for dog owners in California. There's an alert for this fatal bacterial disease that's making its way around after the rain. Leptospirosis is spread by a bacteria that's found in the urine of infected animals, most commonly rats, which are also very common throughout LA, but they contaminate soil and stagnant water. A handful of cases have already been discovered, and it's nothing to be afraid of. However, awareness can help with prevention. If your dog is experiencing any vomiting or jaundice or abnormal urination, it's advised that you take them to the vet. So now I would love to talk about what's going on in Minnesota, and it's probably not what you think. We're not going to go through the ins and outs of the shooting of Renee because if you have managed to see the video, you can see that there was certain level of instigating going on, and her wife got out of the car to deliberately record the instigation, and the woman chose to run over another human being with a car. ICE or not, you aren't justified in running someone over just because you don't like what they're doing. Since when did becoming violent become a valid response to not having effective emotional intelligence and communication skills? Anyways, Christy Noem, who is the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, is saying that people may need to be prepared to prove citizenship. As of late, there have been a lot of raids by ICE looking for illegal immigrants. Many of the raids have been violent. Many people have been detained. Many people have been deported. I've had conversations myself with people who have close connections to people who have been detained. And they've expressed frustration because ICE will see people of certain skin tones and automatically be forceful with them and arrest them regardless of whether they may be a citizen or not. I've heard several instances where people were detained who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they were detained even though they were citizens. And of course, it's frustrating, and no one wants to be accused of something that they haven't done and treated poorly for it. But how can we solve this realistically? By asking people to prove their citizenship. So, of course, naturally, people are getting upset by this, in Minnesota specifically. Due to the Fourth Amendment, an officer is not able to demand to see your ID, at least not without reasonable cause. Now, we all know how much of a challenge and, dare I say, a problem that illegal immigration has been over the past several years. But when a pipe bursts, you have to shut the valve. It's a really tricky situation to be in, and it's not black or white. However, getting upset that they're at least trying to make it less stigmatizing and less aggressive by asking to see your ID isn't helping the situation. And I understand having paranoia and fear. However, we can choose to give some grace to people in this situation because we've all been put in the situation and we're all kind of dealing with the shit end of the stick. You know, we can be so sensitive and it's a shitty situation, like, but we have to pick we have to pick one, you know? Illegal immigration is a challenge in any country. It creates economic strain on the government. Do we know what that economic strain on the government means? It means economic strain on you and me. We pay the government, and the more it's strained, the more we pay. We receive a lot of flack because people say, you know, it's so hard to become a citizen of the United States. And I'm a citizen, so I can't truly understand what it's like to go through that process. However, I do have friends who have gone through the process, and the red tape is a nightmare. However, compared to a lot of other countries, it's a simple process. Not easy, but simple. Let's take France, for instance. First, you have to be on a temporary visa, student, work, whatever. You have to be there with your visa for 5 years before you can even apply for a permanent residency, which is like the equivalent of the green card in the States. Okay, so you hit your 5 year mark, and then you start your 10-year permanent residency process. You have to functionally speak the language at more than a conversational level. You also have to show an effort of developing your fluency. You have to have a job or a business, and you need to sign an integration contract. What is an integration contract? You don't just get to take it and sign it. You have to go to classes for a year, learning the history, rights, duties, and values of what it means to be French in addition to learning the language and receiving job assistance. When you pass all of this and you receive your 10-year permanent residency, you can then start the process of trying to become a citizen. Again, I'm not saying that it's easy to become a citizen in the US. I know it's a challenge and I've witnessed the process as several friends have taken it. However, we have to compare. Now, the system might be problematic because the process itself is simpler than other places. You want to become a citizen of Egypt, it takes 10 years living there or $250,000. Many people find simpler ways of gaining citizenship. You have to do what you have to do. But we cannot be mad that they're asking for our IDs. So now we're going to take a random trip to South America, where in Guatemala, inmates at 3 different prisons rioted and took 46 people hostage. It's reported that a gang leader wanted to be transferred to another facility for better conditions and special treatment. There were no deaths or injuries among the hostages, who were mostly guards, thank God. This happened allegedly in direct reaction to the Interior Ministry revoking privileges from the gang leaders. Apparently, hostage situations are common at prisons in Guatemala. However, this situation in particular seems to have been a larger amount of hostages. So, what's going on in Israel? A story that I find to be a little bit funny, and maybe I'm just missing something, but it makes me giggle. So, soldiers from the Golan Brigade stole a herd of 250 goats from Syria and they gave them to some farms in Judea and Samaria. Apparently, a farmer saw the goats traveling and reported it, but there was a lot of fog, so surveillance was difficult. The commander of the team was dismissed, and the rest of the team has been suspended as the investigation continues. And the agricultural ministry is currently trying to figure out where all the goats are. Frankly, goats are one of the most bizarre, scary looking animals to me. I saw a goat in person for the first time in my entire life, maybe 4 years ago, and it's kind of traumatic. First of all, their eyes are absolutely nothing like how they look in movies. In movies and cartoons, they make goats' eyes look like people eyes with round pupils, but they have these weird rectangular pupils and they look on the face like they don't even know what's going on half the times. Anyways, seems like a harmless prank, and I hope these guys don't get in too much trouble. It's just a few goats. But stealing is not good. A helicopter had to make an emergency landing last week due to whatever issues it was having, and it needed to be towed via a harness by another helicopter. Now, it seems to me like there might be a more effective way to move like a 20-ton flying aircraft than to connect it with a string to move it. But what do I know? Anyways, the harness became detached and it fell. Fortunately, there were no casualties. Now, the UN now officially says that the hunger crisis is over in Gaza. I don't know about you, but I missed when it began. Moving on, soldiers were dispatched to Judea and Samaria because there were reports that suspects were impersonating IDF soldiers and robbing different shops. 3 terrorists were found after a search, along with a variety of weapons. The situation is currently under investigation. However, it is believed that they are members of a Bedouin terror cell. This is incredibly concerning because if official military gear is accessible by terrorists, terrorists will have access to military gear to perpetrate terror under the guise of being there to potentially help.